Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Andrea Epting, and you are listening to the Direct Impact Podcast. On the Direct Impact Podcast, we explore all the many ways we might enhance our mental health and leave a positive and life-giving impact in our wake. Today, we are with an amazing speaker and author, and Dana Diaz. Welcome to the show. I am going to do a quick intro, and then I'm going to let you just add a little bit more about yourself and your lived experience. Dana Diaz is a wife, a mother, and author of the best-selling book, Gasping for Air, The Stronghold of Narcissistic Abuse. In addition to her lifelong experience with narcissistic abuse, Dana's education in journalism and psychology at DePaul University in Chicago gave her the ability to accurately verbalize and express how narcissistic abuse creates confusion and conflict within its victims. So that she can help other victims know how they are not alone and better understand their own circumstances. Today, Dana is a proud voice for fellow victims who are unable, afraid, or ashamed to share their experiences. She has been a guest on over 100 podcasts globally, striving to create awareness and understanding to ensure victims are given the support that they need to first understand their situation and then begin the healing process. She has also been a featured speaker in a summit for healing after trauma and will be featured in 2 more summits in 2024. Her first book, chronicling her own abusive marriage that lasted nearly 3 decades, started as a journal that she hid under her couch cushion in the basement. Dana lives with her husband in Illinois and is in the process of publishing the prequel and sequel to Gasping for Air. Dana, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so grateful to all of you podcast hosts, because when I first got out of my situation with my ex-husband, I listened to my very first podcast ever. And of course, I was looking for answers for what I had been through. And a woman shared her story about having been married to a narcissist and the abuses she suffered. And it was like she was telling my story. I mean, everything was like, oh my God, that was me. I get it. But somebody else got it. And so that's why I'm so passionate and appreciative to every host that has me on, because I think that somewhere there is somebody that is going to hear what we're talking about, and it's going to resonate and hopefully change their life for the better, or make them see their situation for what it is.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
And it's a topic, you and I have discussed, but it's just near and dear to my heart. As a certified sex addictions therapist, working with betrayed partners every day, that's what I do. We see what narcissistic abuse does and the complex post-traumatic stress that comes from that.
Yes.
And I love how you're going on podcasts to, again, share your lived experience. So many people are going through this.
Yes.
A lot of our clients, they're coming to us because they have partners who have sexual compulsivity and disordered acting out behaviors. So our partners are finding us as their addicts are in a process of healing as well. But so many people are not in that situation. They are in the messy middle of all of this. Their partner has no desire for health or healing, and they're definitely not naming it what it is. Right. And so they're scared, they're stuck, and thinking they're all alone. So I so appreciate you getting this out there.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today, we're going to be talking about the push and the pull of romantic relationships with a narcissist. And I would argue any relationship with a narcissist, and how to be more aware, like how do people start to discover, like, I think I might be in a relationship with a narcissist,
Yeah. And, there's a lot there. So let's start at the beginning and just talk about what we're talking about exactly, because narcissism is something that people think they know and think they understand, but they really don't. It's just thrown around. Like, if somebody pisses you off these days, they're a narcissist, and that's not the case.
Amen.
So let's go back to the beginning. Narcissus was a Greek god who liked to look at his reflection in the water because he was so handsome, I guess, or at least he thought so. These are everywhere. We see them on social media, especially when with their selfies, and they usually look as good as they think they do. So you cannot hate these people. We're always
Sometimes.
looking at them like, okay, I wish I looked like that. I wish I had your body. I love your hair. I love, the abs are not gonna, wipe my butt when I'm 80, but damn, you're hot. I'd love to have a chance with you. Like, okay, we're good. But these are not people, they might annoy you. They're not harming you with it. They just have a very inflated sense of who they are, and good for them. I wish I had even a minute iota of that self-esteem. But what narcissism has become are people who are seeking to feel much more important than they really are, and to feel this level of superiority. Now, this is a very basic aspect of narcissism, but it's kind of all encompassing, but it's certainly on a spectrum. So you have people that might be like the know-it-all at work that always has the answer and they're always right. They're annoying. Give them that, or you might have a sibling or, somebody, a friend of yours that's like that. But on the very far end of that spectrum, in the most severe circumstances, you have people that are so, I mean, their ego is just craving and starving for power and control and to dominate people, that these are the people that are arrested for domestic violence. This is 20-some% of our male US prison population, and to give people some idea, just from a female perspective, even though this happens to men and women equally, well, a little more to women actually than men, but 38% of all women murdered are murdered by their partner. And most often, these are narcissistic personalities that are inflicting this harm. So, taking narcissism out of it, taking abuse out of it, anytime anybody is intentionally harming you, whether with their hands, with words, with whatever it is, it's toxic, it's harmful, and it can affect your mental health, your physical health. It affects all aspects of your life. And it definitely overlaps with, the work that you do, because oftentimes they will use, a narcissist will use any abuse they can, any way to control and overpower you and diminish you. And oftentimes sexual abuse is involved in this. I certainly experienced it in my marriage, and that's probably a whole other podcast to discuss that. But there's financial abuse, there's legal abuse, they're gaslighting you, they're manipulating you, physical abuse may be involved, verbal abuse. I mean, they will do anything. People say you're walking on eggshells with a narcissist, but I always say, no, I was walking through a minefield, because it didn't matter if I was following a rule or not. I was stepping so lightly, treading so lightly just to keep the peace, but stuff was blowing up all around me, and it was obliterating me and my spirit and my physical health in the meantime.
That's right. It is so traumatic.
Yeah.
And the complex post-traumatic stress that happens, especially over 3 decades of narcissistic abuse that you experienced, you can't minimize that. You can't minimize the impact and how it shows up to distort your thinking, disrupt your executive functioning, and gosh, your sense of self out the window. And you really no longer have that connection to the gut instincts, because you've been gaslit for so long. You question your own thinking, your own needs, your own wants, your own desires. You start to think they are wrong. And so yeah, absolutely, I hear you. So narcissists, and I think you did a really good job of highlighting how you might see them or experience them in the world. I also like to highlight a lot of different things mimic narcissistic personality. Yes. And I just like for our clients also to be our clients and our listeners, be mindful of that. So if you are in a relationship with somebody who is in the throes of active addiction, they are going to absolutely check every single solitary box for narcissistic personality disorder. And you don't really know until they're about a year 18 months clean and sober. And so that's a really tough thing to experience as well, because it's so freaking confusing and it can even be used as an excuse.
Yes. And may I add to that? I always remind people that there are, I mean, I could probably list 100 different tendencies that they're not meant to harm others. They're meant, like in my case, it's meant more for safety. For example, there might be times when I might seem a little bossy, like even the other night, my husband's like, you don't have to control everything. And it's like, I'm not trying to be controlling, to overpower or dominate. I am controlling the situation and the environment so I feel safe. So people do have to understand, I always tell people, take the word narcissist out of it, even if it feels wrong. If you are being harmed in any way by anybody, that's not how healthy relationships work. So yes, thank you for explaining that and keeping that in mind, because checking a box, just because there are narcissists even in my life that I love very much, but
Absolutely.
they're not inflicting harm on me. So
Yeah. And I love how you were just able to name what, you know, I don't know. I've not worked ever with a betrayed partner that doesn't have a tendency towards safety seeking behaviors that look like control.
yeah,
But you're seeking safety, you're seeking normalcy, you're seeking consistency,
yes,
seeking sometimes even
yes,
information, how never mind how damaging it might be, but
right,
seeking again a sense of safety. And so I
yes,
do ask people, it's like, let's call it what it is. You're seeking
yes.
safety.
Yeah, and it, like I said, it can show up. I have been called a narcissist by many people, and it's
Mm,
offensive, but and I want to say this now. I keep adding on because there's so much here, but people ask me, well, what if I'm a narcissist? Oh my God, am I a narcissist? How would I know? My answer to that is ask yourself if you're a narcissist. Because if your immediate answer is no, I'm not a narcissist, you might be. But if you're worried about it,
mhm.
if you have any sense of empathy and care and consideration
Thank
in your
you.
heart, I promise you, you're not a narcissist.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about some of those narcissistic qualities that wind up being so damaging in relationships.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's using any abuse, um, any I call them antics because it was always like a game. And that's where we had this push and pull. It was, for example, um, the gaslighting was probably one of the worst things, that and people don't need to understand what this is. It came from an old movie, I think from the 1940s or 50s,
Mm-hmm.
where a husband was flickering the lights and the wife every night, and the wife kept saying, "Oh, why is the power flickering? What's happening with the power?" And the husband was saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." He's sitting there reading his newspaper every night. The lights are just fine. They've been on the whole time. It's this doubting yourself, the crazy making, telling you that your reality as you see it is wrong, and you start to rely on them. And this is one of the, narcissism 101. They basically want you to become dependent on them
Mm-hmm.
100%. Do are to sway you to believe everything they say, to make you think like they do, to make you rely on them for everything, for love, affection. I used to say when I came out of that relationship, it was like I couldn't even think for myself. And I thought I was an independent, college educated. I actually have a pretty high IQ, and yet I was stunted. Like I don't even know what to think because it had been dictated to me for so long. This man was even asking me questions, and immediately after asking me a question would say, your response should be da 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 da. It's like, okay, well, you just want to hear it come out of my mouth, but I mean, they take away every part of you. You have no self anymore. But that's the narcissist tendency, because they want to isolate you. They don't like your friends. Can we go to my family for the holidays instead of yours? Then you don't, next thing you know, a few years later, you're not even seeing your friends.
Mhm.
They don't like you wearing that. What are you trying to get attention wearing that dress? So you stop wearing that dress. Oh, I don't like you talking to the neighbor. Then you stop talking to the neighbor. I
Mhm.
couldn't even go to church without being accused of screwing the 80-some-year-old priest. And
Yeah.
so then, I was like wavering, and everything, it just creeps in all these different little ways, and the money, the financial dependence.
Mhm.
A lot
Mhm.
of times, oh, just stay home and be a homemaker to
Mhm.
raise our children. Well, now you have no money, so you can't leave them if you wanted to, or at least you're made to think you can't, because how are you going to support them? There's all these ways, and the sexual abuse is ridiculous. And I am going to argue with anyone who says, and I'm sure you have seen this, I don't care if you're married or not, if you are not consenting to sexual and not just intercourse, but any sexual intimacy, it is still wrong. It is a violation. And to have that taken away from you as well by somebody who is your husband and does say they love you adds this whole other layer of, I mean, you want to talk about betrayal. Um, it's so, I mean, you could see I'm still like catching my breath, and I've been out of that marriage for 3.5 years. It's just a whirlwind. Your mind is constantly running through all this stuff. So, to say what are narcissistic tendencies, anything that fulfills their ego, anything that makes them feel like they can control you, overpower you, and basically dictate everything and anything in your life.
So you named a ton of things when you were just talking. And I would just like to reflect on some of the things that I
Yes,
heard you
please.
say. You talked about coercion and manipulation, especially
Yes.
around sex, which is this is what a wife does, this is your duty, or feeling pressured, or feeling like you um, are going to be harmed in some way or deprived in some way if you don't perform for your partner. That is huge. And that is in addition to the sexual assault that we see in marriages every
Yes.
day.
Yes.
Marriages struggling due to narcissistic abuse. So the coercion. I also heard you mention future faking, the promises for the future.
Oh, yeah.
And that is absolutely another characteristic. When you're at the tail end of that cycle, you're going to see that future faking, the promises, this is what it's going to look like if you give me one more chance, all
Mm-hmm.
of that stuff. You talked about uh, supply. You talked about narcissistic supply, and that's why they cut you off from the world. They don't want you to be successful. They don't want you to be independent. They don't want you
No,
to thrive. They don't want you to have a life where you might present as desirable or attractive to someone else, because that takes away their supply. And it's all a supply for their ego, because their ego is so deflated and so small.
exactly.
And I
And
love that you touched on so
yeah,
much. Yeah.
yeah. And to add to that as well, they just want to inhibit anything that brings you joy,
Mm-hmm.
happiness, or
Mm-hmm.
peace, because God forbid you have those things, because if it's not associated with them,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a threat.
And if you're not completely traumatized and guessing and hopping from one foot to the other, then you're going to get wise. They do will. I mean,
Exactly. They don't want you
yeah,
influenced, just
they
like
do
my
not want
next
you
door
influenced.
neighbor
Yeah.
did not like him. And that's why it was a problem. Don't
Mm-hmm.
talk to the next door neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was more than that. I mean, he was, there were a lot of things there, but it's sad that 17 years these people lived next door to me, and literally, and I mean literally, probably
Mm-hmm.
for a dozen of those years, I had zero contact with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
next door. That's
out
sad.
out of fear because
Yeah.
of the instability and the eruption that comes when they feel like you might again have an ounce of insight into what's happening.
Right. Just like my ex did not
Mhm.
like me being on the computer, I would get, oh my gosh, scolded, mocked, ridiculed if I so much as perused the internet. God forbid
Mm-hmm.
I got information. He didn't like me reading books
Mm.
because I wasn't paying attention to him. It was all these things. I didn't even have a smartphone until
Mm.
2021, or I'm sorry, 2020 in the fall after our divorce because he didn't want me having a smartphone. I didn't need information.
Let me ask you a question. Hindsight being 2020, how much of that was him projecting on you what he was doing with his tech?
100%.
Okay, I was
A
just
hundred
curious.
percent because it was when I always say there was a moment. It was actually ironically Mother's Day of 2019 because I'll never forget it. I remember this stuff. That's when my rose-colored glasses came off. I had sensed things up to that point. I had seen things, but that's when everything just kind of it's like the dam just let all the floodgates open up and let everything in, and I saw it for what it was.
Mm.
And it was shortly after that I found out, well, he didn't want me on Facebook because there were reasons that he was trying to come up with. Well, we don't want this person getting a hold of you and that person. Well, guess what? Mr. You shouldn't go on Facebook because it's dangerous, had
Mm-hmm.
2 Facebook pages,
Yep.
not one, but 2.
Yep.
And when
Mm-hmm.
I confronted him on it, it was, well, you want me to work, don't you? He hadn't worked for the last 4.5 years of our marriage. It was up to me to, foot the bill for his luxury life on the couch. But yes, there is a lot of duplicitous behavior. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. And that's when things unravel. But that's also when things get very dangerous because
Mm-hmm.
once they know, that, that push and pull stops, and now it's just it's every man for himself, because in that push and
Mm.
pull, it's you notice something, but then they caress your cheek and they love you, and oh, I
Mm-hmm.
won't do it again, and then they do it,
Mm-hmm.
and they go a little further this time, and then they bring you back in. But I always say it felt, ultimately looking back, I felt like I was like a dog with a shock collar. I
Right.
I had certain bounds I had to stay within, and God forbid if I would get shocked like nobody's business, and every time I get shocked it was worse.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you find in your experience that that narcissistic abuse cycle got more and more rapid over
Yeah.
time? So that whole cycle of, the acting out, the betrayal, the pushing you away, and then the pulling you back in, the promises, the future faking, everything's going to be different. Did you see that that cycle happened faster and faster and faster?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking that. Nobody has ever asked me that. But yes, I mean, in the beginning, I think part of why it lasted so long is
Mm-hmm.
because, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that there could be a month or two, maybe 3 months where things were pretty
Mm-hmm.
good. And I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
wow, it's like, everything's going to be fine. We just got past that rough patch, and then something would happen. But I would say the last 2 or 3 years of it, I mean, it was, I can't even say it was every day. It was multiple times a day, and
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that, I mean, I was living in it. It wasn't even post-traumatic stress. I was just straight up traumatized and
That's
stressed
right. That's
to the
right.
point that my physical body, I became autoimmune and developed this lung disease. People can hear the scratchiness. It's like having COPD and fibromyalgia, what
Mm-hmm.
I have. And it's a rare lung syndrome that is common among people that live in abusive situations for prolonged periods of time. So it was, that's why I say it was like a minefield. Every time I was trying to, come up for air, I was being pulled back under and just drowning in it.
And thank you so much for highlighting the body betrayal that inevitably
Oh,
comes with
yeah.
partner betrayal. We talk about that a lot on our podcast, and that was just the perfect reflection of when you endure this type
Mhm.
of abuse for prolonged periods of time, your body will betray you too because you're betraying
Yes.
it. You're staying.
Yes.
and your body will, resent that and act out.
Yeah, and it was a direct result of the cortisol, the stress
Mm-hmm.
hormone, which
Oh,
I
yeah.
explain to people is similar to adrenaline, but cortisol rushes through you when you're in fight or flight mode. And I always joke that I've always been a runner. I'm I take the first flight out, I get out of there. But it's not funny when you're in it because and that's a whole other podcast. And the cortisol actually I have discovered plays into that trauma bond and all these other things we talk about with narcissism. So it's really hard when your body is holding you in that situation, but also screaming for you to get out.
That's right. That's right. And I I also like that we talked about the cycle speeding up because I think it gives permission and grace to any partner that's endured for a long period of time, because what was happening once a year that you could recover from, and then every 3 months that you could recover from, and you could kind of, either be in denial about, make it about yourself, but you could recover because it was like 90% of it's great.
Right.
10% is horrible, and then over time it's like 90% is horrible or 100% is horrible. I just want people to know, like, understand, like, that's part of why you stay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons people stay. And,
Yeah, elaborate on that.
it,
Yeah.
I think even in any relationship, even in, I hate to use the word normal marriages or relationships,
Yeah.
you may not have the finances or very easily be able to just part ways. Your families are intertwined, your friend groups are intertwined, you're friends with other couples that you go, out to dinner with every Thursday or whatever it is. And then you have kids, and I only had one, and that's actually I'm finding out a result of the cortisol and the autoimmunity that has kind of been in me, because I had multiple miscarriages. But
Mm-hmm.
you have a kid. What happens then? Because the narcissist, oh my gosh, there are people that are vengeful, but the narcissist is going to go for blood when you decide that you don't want to be with them anymore. They may never have wanted your child nor cared for that child, as was the case was for me and probably many people in narcissistic situations, but they will make sure that you do not end up with that child. They will do anything and everything. They have already discredited you anyway and told people you're crazy and you're unfit to be a mother or a father or whatever it is. So when the time comes, they already have that narrative in place. They already have people that have believed them and will vouch for them to go against you. But it's also, I mean, there's things people don't even think about. I mean, aside from finances, kids, the obvious things. I mean, for me, I lived on a farm. We had cows, pigs, and chickens. I mean, they're financial assets, but like, who is going to take care of them? I had a
Mm-hmm.
dog with epilepsy and lymphoma that needed medication, constant care. I was nursing her around the clock. Not every area has a shelter, or, I had no place where I could go with a bloodhound that had, all of these health issues. And how was I going to pay for her? You know what I mean? There's all these things that go through your mind. Plus, I'm going to go back to the basic thing of any relationship. You have an investment of time and energy and effort. You are
Yep.
emotionally invested. So you hope. You are hanging on to that tiny, tiny thread of hope. Just what can I do to be different? What can I do to change this? My thought, having a background in psychology, was, well, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. So if I change something in my behavior, if I react differently or act differently in a situation, therefore he has to act or react differently in response. Well, that didn't work either because they got
Mm-mm.
a lot of tricks up their sleeve and it always came back to bite me in the butt.
And
But God,
it can't be managed.
it can't be, but you try. When you're in that situation, I have a husband, I have a kid, I have a life with this man. Um, I had to try, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you're 20
Mm-hmm.
years in, you have to try. Who wouldn't? Not too many people just say, I'm not happy. I'm going to walk out. Plus, let's be real. Let's be real. we all have days, we all have moods, we all fluctuate. There are days where you might think, yeah, I don't know if I'm really into this relationship or this marriage. And then the next day you're like, oh, I'm in love. So, it happens to the best of us, but
Mhm.
you just try to look at it reasonably,
Yeah.
like, okay, we've been together, we have a life bearable, and peaceful for everybody involved, particularly the children, because when you have them, you sacrifice any, you know, any possibility that you might have the life that you thought you were going to have. But
Yeah.
it's complicated. It's very complicated. But then let's go to the reality of, why did I stay, or why does anybody stay? Why are there people out there treating the people they claim to love like dog do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate the way that you were able to highlight the roller coaster ride of that narcissistic relationship, and the ups and the downs and the round and the round and around and then the up and the down. I mean, it is absolute insanity.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that your rose-colored glasses came off. At some point, you hit that space that a lot of people come to where it's like, you know what? I don't have another round left in me. Like, I don't have another go. What happened there? How did you come to that point?
That was somewhere, it was shortly after my diagnosis with upper airway resistance syndrome and my autoimmunity, because I think it was, I mean, I obviously had tolerated a lot. 3 weeks into our relationship was the first time he whipped something across the room at my head. I had a crowbar swung at my head. There were knives and guns and all the things that happen in a relationship that anybody with any sense of self-esteem and worth would have said, that's it. You crossed the line. I'm out. I had tolerated so much, but for some reason, when I got sick and I found out it was a direct result of what the doctors were calling chronic stress, you know, I tried not to resent him, but I couldn't overcome that. I couldn't overcome that because he was still saying, I love you. You're the one. There'll never be anybody but you. I'll never love any. It's two of us against the world. All the things that who doesn't want to hear these things? And you want to believe them. That I was sick for the rest of my life. Okay. I'm sorry. My screen froze. Are you there?
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, the internet was a little wonky.
Okay.
um, so probably go back about like 30 seconds and just I don't know, just come in where you feel comfortable.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
Well, on my end, the last thing I heard you talk about was when he was doing the like future faking. I love you, you're the only one for me. And you said, what person doesn't want to hear that?
Yeah, exactly. And, so I held on to that. I tried to hold on to that. But, you know, I always talk about everybody has a deal breaker in a relationship, especially romantic one. People say, oh, if he cheated on me, I'm done. If he does this to me, I'm done. Whatever it is. You think that, but then you're in that relationship and it happens and it happens again and it happens again and it happens again. You don't know what your deal breaker is until it happens. And for me, I think because I had given and sacrificed basically everything in me, I sacrificed, I didn't go into a career in journalism or psychology because he didn't want me to. He had me cleaning houses, scrubbing floors and toilets in a podunk town. He had moved me 90 miles outside of the city where I had planned to have a very successful career. I wanted to be the next Barbara Walters. You know, I had all these aspirations and dreams. He took that away from me. He took my family away from me. He took his family away from me. Towards the end, he admitted to me that he told them atrocious lies about me to make them hate me because he said they liked me better than they liked him. I couldn't have that. I didn't have friends. Like, it just started to feel like he was, I mean, I saw it for what it was. He took everything from me. So when my health was taken as a result of him, I would have never, ever been able to tell you that was my deal breaker. But I had nothing else left. I had nothing else left. And a doctor sat me down, my neurologist at one point. I had withered down to 93 pounds. And I was skeletal. I could barely breathe. I was now wearing a backpack oxygen machine. And just so people know, I had coached cross country for the previous 9 years before that at my son's school. I was very active. I was one of those weirdos that eats apples and hard-boiled eggs for lunch, like very healthy. I should not be wearing a backpack oxygen machine and be 93 skeletal pounds. I was not healthy. And I was having all these symptoms. And the neurologist sat me down at one point and just said, your body is literally shutting down. It is doing everything it can just to keep your lungs working and keep your heart beating. But I literally felt like I was dying of a broken heart. I just I was already dead inside, I felt like, and my body was just following. And that was it. What else could I give this man? And what was I going to get in return? I mean, there
And
were so many
can you
things
answer
going
that
through me.
question? What else could you have given him?
I don't think I could have. I could have,
You
honestly,
were
I
about
will
to give
tell
him your
you.
life. You were about to
Well,
give him your whole life.
and I'm going to tell you what I discuss in my book. What
Uh-huh.
I was about to give him was I was going to die.
That's
And I
right.
remembered laying there envisioning in my head, I am going to die. He is going to get my life insurance, which would make him very, very happy. And he was going to go probably buy a new sports car. And he was going to go cry at my funeral about how poor, pitiful me, I'm a widow and a single dad now, and take everybody's pity and run with it.
That's right.
And I remember laying there saying, over my dead body, literally, is this man going to use me one last time after my death to achieve that end? To hell with him. It's on now. And it
Okay.
turned into a game of Survivor.
Okay.
One of us was not going to come out of that marriage, you know, alive possibly. And it did get very dicey. The domestic violence escalated, and it was not funny by any means, but the fight in me, the fight in me to fight back finally rose up. And I was like, oh, no, 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 I'm not going down without that fight. So that's what, but
Thank you.
that's what eventually got me out.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't had that epiphany in that moment and really seen things for what they were, as delusional and paranoid as they sounded, they were reality. And this is a reality for too many people.
It is. It is. And I so appreciate your story because I have seen it time and time and time and time and time and time again, too many times. And I do believe that when someone hears a story like this, they can realize that they're there now. They're on the way there now. Maybe they haven't hit that, I hate the word bottom, but maybe they haven't hit that yet.
Right.
But they can start to recognize, oh my gosh, this is the trajectory. If I don't really honestly look at what is going on with these dynamics and what the eventual inevitable outcome is going to be.
Exactly. And that has been my mission, because after I came out of the situation, and certainly, I mean, I was fully aware I had the complex post-traumatic stress, and I had a lot of healing to do in so many ways, physically and mentally. I was looking for answers. I was looking for, you know, and when I discovered that this was actually something that is happening to a lot of people, I mean, more people than it should. It compelled me to share my story, not because it's the most traumatic or the most severe, but because I wasn't afraid anymore. There was nothing else he could take away from me. I had nothing more to lose. So I thought, you know what? I am going to speak up. People need to hear that this goes on right under their nose. I mean, do you know how many people that even were very close to me, like my next door neighbors, had no idea. They had no idea. My kid has no clue. He's going to be 21. He lived in that house. He doesn't even know the half of it. And he never will, because it's not his business, and I won't tell him, and he'll never read the book. And we have that respectful relationship that he understands this is not information that he needs, that he just needs to live his life and take care of him. But
Yeah.
I think that there is definitely power in sharing our stories and understanding what the real consequences can be, because I thought I was doing a noble thing, staying in my marriage, keeping the family together, trying again. But all it was going to get me was buried in a cemetery somewhere. And that's not where anybody should be when they have a full whole life to live.
Thank you. I mean, I think that that is just the message that we are trying to get out is it's just it's so beautiful. And I love to reflect on somebody who has come to the other side where you have made your previous experience and trauma a passion to serve others in the future. And I love that. And that's what our podcast really is about, is traumatic growth and the healing that can come when we share our experiences with others. And I know that this is part of your healing journey, and just being here today and sharing this with others that
Yes.
are going to resonate with it and be like, wow, oh my gosh, what could I do with my journal hiding under my couch or under my mattress?
Right.
And there's just so much value that can be used on the other side. And I just think that you're reflecting that today. And I'm just very grateful. I know that we're not going to have enough time to go through all of the questions
Right.
today, but I just want to honor you and say thank you so much for being here. And I want to honor your experience, what you've been through, what you've come through, and just say that, if you had, or just let me ask you this question. If you have a call to action for anyone listening today, what would that call to action be?
Oh, this is an easy one. I challenge everybody just to simply ask yourself, what do I want? It's a very simple question, but it's a life-changing one, because when I got to the point where I really saw things for what they were, I said, what do I want? And immediately, we all have things in our heart that we haven't fulfilled. I wanted to be married. I just didn't want to be married to somebody that treated me like that and ultimately wanted me dead. I wanted to use my education in journalism and psychology. I wanted to live in peace. I wanted to feel safe, that I could close my eyes at night and not worry about somebody attacking me or trying to kill me. I wanted what people take for granted, basically,
Mm,
and my next question was, am I going to have that if I stay here? And I
thank you.
mean, I'm getting chills now remembering that. I mean, there was no denying that, no, I was not going to have that with this man in this relationship. And I'm going to go so far as to say this, you know, love is romanticized and fantasized. Did I love him? Despite everything? Yes, love is an emotion. I loved him. Um, but love is not going to make the relationship a loving relationship, if that makes any sense to anybody. You want to receive love as well. Love should be reciprocated in a relationship in the form of respect and trust and consideration and all these other wonderful things that I was never going to have with a narcissist. never mind an abusive one at the very least. So again, what do I want? Ask yourself that, and then say, can I have what I want? And one more thing on that, there's always more. It's okay to want. It's okay. Everybody is entitled and allowed to have their own thoughts and feelings and dreams and things that they can hope for. Don't feel bad. It's not selfish. You are able to have your own life.
I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to reiterate, it is healthy and it is safe. I'll challenge people on that to hope and to dream and to desire a future, you know, the future that you want, that you envision, that you deserve, and then pause and ask yourself, can I have that? Is that possible in this current relationship as it stands today?
Yes.
Because yes, you have the power to change and grow and heal and achieve, but don't, hinge that on someone else changing. Because there's no guarantee there. That's for daggum sure.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I just, again, I appreciate everything that you've offered us today, and I would
Thank
absolutely
you.
love to have you back on. I feel like we're going to get a lot of additional questions from the
Yes.
audience, and I would like really to ask their questions to you. So I would love to have you back on, and we'll announce that to the
Yeah.
audience of when that's going to be. But for today, I just want to say thank you so much to Dana Diaz, because she is making a direct impact. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you so much.